that. We're going to do a review. I want to do a quick review and then move on to some newer information and answer any questions you guys have. Did everybody get the text? Did anybody have problems getting the text? Good, because apparently there was some issues at the bookstore and they don't believe we exist. So, all right, course objectives. I just want to, again, run through it very quickly and see if you have any questions. What is epistemology? What is the epistemological approach to research? Does that sound familiar? That was so long ago.
Studying how we learn.
Yeah. So by applying the epistemological approach to what you're going to be doing, which is research, you're going to do what? How are you going to do that? You want a hint? Okay, you're going to pay attention to how you research, and you're going to let me know how you're researching. So for example, when you do, anybody ever done an annotated or working bibliography? Okay, you're going to be doing those in this class, and one of the things you want to do is explain not only what's in the source, but how you went about getting the source. You have the text and you have the context, and the context is the process by which you went through to get the source. So whether you use an internet source, you use a text source, you use an interview, okay? And we talked about primary, secondary, and tertiary types of research, and we'll go over those again too. So paying attention to how you're researching. And that's a big part of this class, so you want to be sure and pay attention to that. Reading. And in reading, everybody knows how to read in this class, hopefully, but to read well, to read and reread and unpack things. So you're going to be using a lot of analytical tools to go in and pick apart these texts and look at them and dissect them in class and outside of class, and then write about them, because the first assignment you're going to be doing is a rhetorical analysis, which is dissecting the specimen and then explaining what you've done and to say how it works and how well it works. What's the efficacy of the document in terms of its purpose for its particular audience through the techniques that it uses. Okay. And then when you do that writing, you're going to use other sources that talk about that source. So if you've chosen a text or a document or an image, it can be a combination, and you're going to write about that. What have other people said about it, or things like it? Could be the genre, and we'll talk about how to go about finding sources for something like that. Any questions? Okay. Again, it's a quick review, so let me know if you have any. We talked about this, being cognizant of your methods, looking at it, critically evaluating your process. If you don't think you have any challenges in research, I'll be surprised. I have challenges in research all the time. So you hit a wall, you try to find another way to do it, you go to someone. If you can't find a secondary source, you say, I've been to the library, and I've had students do this all the time. They say, I've been to the library, I went through the search engines and the stacks, and I couldn't find what I needed. Well, what's a backup plan you can have?
Ask a librarian.
Yeah, there's a concept, ask a librarian. One of the things that a lot of you don't realize, or that some of you have expressed that you didn't realize until I told you, is that each of the librarians has a degree or several degrees in other areas. So we have an engineering librarian, we have a biology librarian or science librarian, we have all of them. And there's even a listing, and we'll go on the website and look at it. There are emails, and you can ask them questions online. You can set up a time to meet with them. It will cut your research time down incredibly. My co-author is a librarian. It makes me look smart. So I say, how do I do this? So if you hit a wall, you want to ask someone. If you're looking for a secondary source, you can't think of anything, maybe you have a professor who works in the field. Ask them, and they'll give you secondary sources. You're getting ready to write, or you'll be getting ready to write, a thesis, and your mentor will probably recommend a lot of secondary sources for you, okay? And we talked about this, the recursive nature of the whole process is messy. So you don't finish all your research and then do your analytical work and then write your paper and push print and you're done. None of it goes in that order. It'll go back and forth and all kinds of things. So All right. If I'm going too fast, stop me. But primary research, when you interview, well, actually, when you conduct an experiment and then you write up your results, that's primary. When you interview someone about a topic, that's primary. When you conduct a survey, that's primary. Okay? Secondary sources are when you access documents. You're not talking to people, you're not dealing with human beings, and you're not dealing with rats or whatever people cut up. Pigs. What do people cut up now? What'd you do in high school? Pigs. They always do pigs or eyeballs. Sheep eyeballs. What's that?
Cow.
You did a whole cow?
No.
Oh,
Piece.
a piece of a cow, like a steak.
In high school, they didn't.
A Slim Jim. No, don't tell me
I
that.
was not in that class, but I heard about it.
Why is that worse than a pig? It's a cultural thing. Pigs are supposed to be pretty smart, but... Okay. Tertiary. When you look at encyclopedic summaries, something that is basically, it's not a primary source, it's not a secondary source, it's the summary or a reference to a secondary source. It's a tertiary source. Wikipedia could be that. Abstract. What's an abstract? Yeah, and those are very helpful when you're doing research because it gives you a little preview to decide whether or not you want to read the whole paper. So that would be considered a tertiary form of research. How does each stage of research affect your previous research? And you want to pay attention to that too. I changed my mind. People can change their minds. In politics, that's called waffling or flip-flopping. Because God forbid you should change your mind with new information. Text and context. This is incredibly important, and we'll go more into that with some examples. But the text is the thing, this is the document. And it doesn't have to be text necessarily, it can be an image. What's the context around it? The Banksy example is a good one because here's graffiti. Well, graffiti must be washed off because graffiti is offensive. Not only that, this is graffiti that's anti-immigrant. Let's get rid of it because it's offensive. Then someone says, by the way, that was by Banksy. And it was ironic. Oops. So the context, but because it's on a wall and it wasn't commissioned like a mural, there's a communication breakdown. Okay. By the way, I was reading the article and the guy who runs the business that's next door, he says, well, we would love to have him come back and do an appropriate mural for families. Well, that's not what Banksy does. And that kind of gets rid of like when we had downtown, I don't know if you guys remember this, we used to have a wall for graffiti because the city didn't want people doing graffiti everywhere, so they actually had a designated wall for graffiti. And it was used for a while, but then, graffiti artists say, I don't want to use the designated official wall for graffiti. That's not what graffiti is. So people miss the point. So, okay, context, and we're going to talk a little bit more about Kyros. Deciphering, we talked about that. How do you go in and penetrate something? These are fairly obvious examples of something that you would have to get through some hurdles of deciphering. But even when you look at something like a statement, a bumper sticker, a text, something religious, something political, it doesn't matter. You're going to need to go in and actually pull it apart, think about what the words they're using are, and whether you're trying to figure out something because it's a manual or an opinion, you want to break it apart and really look at it. And I'm going to try to get you guys to be enthusiastic about that because I think that's where the learning begins. Reading. What's an example of an purely informative document?
Lab report.
Yeah, a lab report. It's just basically telling you, here's what we found. Yeah, good. How about an instructive document?
Directions.
For?
Cookbook.
Cookbook, yes. Yeah, recipe, how to do something. It's requiring an action from the reader. So that'd be instructive. How about persuasive? Okay, in the paper on something, yeah. And then you want to break it down in terms of finding out, okay, it's persuasive. Then you want to do a demographic profile and figure out who the primary audience is. What do you want to know about the primary audience if you're trying to convince them of something?
Essentially their core beliefs.
Yeah, what are their core beliefs, and are you trying to change their beliefs on something? Yeah, you had your hand up.
So say just the various demographics are part of like age and education so that you know what'll
Absolutely.
want to read.
Age, education. And by the way, by education, I don't even necessarily mean what degree you have. If you're putting together a manual for someone to do, you don't want to know what, if you have a master's degree, please go to the simple section. If you're an academic, you have no practical skills. No, but one of the things they want to know is what is your knowledge base about the topic? Right, good. Age, region. I have a camera book for that camera over there that's really, really thick, and I thought, wow, this is going to tell me a lot about how to use this camera. Well, about this much of it is in English. I don't need to know how to run the camera in Portuguese, so that's pretty much useless, you know. And so, but what, you know, you have it in several languages. What do you do when you want to get around languages?
Just pictures.
Just pictures, yeah, because that always works. We'll talk about that too. So what we use, how we use it, the language, is it jargon, is it slang, is it euphemism, tropes? I'm teaching a class on translations, and there's something called a cryptolect, where usually language is that which you translate because you want to get information across. You want a clearly communicated or transmitted signal. What can get in the way of the signal? And we're going to talk about that too. But in some cases, you don't want people to know what you're talking about, and so you engage in a cryptolect, an encrypted form of language. Keep people outside of the line of communication.
So they don't know.
Right, but why wouldn't you want people to know? I mean, the point of language and communication is to...
Secrets.
Yeah.
If you're writing something, it might like make the person a little more excited to read it if it's like a special thing that they know. Like if not, maybe they don't know the language.
True, and when you hear, it's funny, there's a term called shibboleth, which you don't have to know, it's when I'm using in the colloquium, but it's a good Old Testament term, and it's a Hebrew word that means grain, and they used it when they wanted to make sure that there were non-Hebrew speakers in the tribe, and they'd say shibboleth, and if they were an invader, they'd say sibboleth, because they couldn't pronounce it. And there are certain languages where they have trouble pronouncing it, and they'd run a sword through them. So shibboleth was a password. I mean, there are shibboleths in all kinds of things. The term itself is a way you identify. So if I hear someone in common, well, actually, I'll give you a perfect example. I was in an apartment complex, and I went outside, and I saw a bumper sticker that said Rhetor. And that's all it said. Not a bumper sticker, excuse me. It was actually better than that. It was a license plate that said Rhetor. And the woman was backing out, and I think I scared the hell out of her, but I ran up and knocked on her window, and she said, yes? I said, you're a Rhetor? She said, yes, I am. And so that jargon immediately made us realize, wow, we have a whole world in common. If you hear someone speaking a language that you know, or if you're abroad and you find out somebody's from your town or something like that, suddenly you have a link. A cryptolect is usually a little different than jargon insofar as jargon isn't necessarily trying to keep people out, it's trying to find a shorthand way of explaining something that a lot of people might not understand. A cryptolect is actually designed so that we don't want other people to know, we want to encrypt it. Anyway, I don't want to get too far off on that. What kinds of images do they use? Do they use photographs? Do they use drawings? Do they use both? What's a schematic diagram? That's an image.
A drawing to scale. Like as a big X-ray thing.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Something that we can look at. So if it's circuitry, and I understand all the symbols, I know what a resistor looks like. I know what a capacitor looks like. I know, where the flow of current or electricity is going. And then each of those little symbols will tell me, what I'm looking at. But it's a map of something, so it might be a map of a circuit. But it's an image, and that's a quicker way of getting that information across than sitting there and explaining it. What's the difference between a sign and a symbol? We're going to be going into that quite a bit. Yeah.
A symbol represents something where a sign indicates something.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Or you can look at it as a sign. I shouldn't use the word sign. I should use the word icon, and that's the way the text uses it, and that's kind of important. An icon is what is called denotative or explicit. Stop sign, yield. Road signs are almost always they're called road signs, but there are icons. They tell you something. Actually, I saw one in the, where they're building the Student Experience Center. I still have no idea what that means. That's called a university campus. Anyway, Student Experience Center building, and there's, when you come up there, and there's a yellow, kind of like a yield sign, but it shows an image of a man standing there with a stop sign. It's an icon of an icon. And so what is that telling me?
To look for the man with the soft.
Look for the man with the octagon here in this yellow diamond, and it'll be a red octagon. But it's telling me that something is coming up. If it's a symbol, then it's, as you say, it's connotative. So it's not necessarily a direct relation to it. It could just symbolize something in a sort of almost metaphysical way. It's not a very good way to describe it, but yeah, you understand the difference, and we'll talk more about that. Good. What is Kairos? Give me an example of Kairos. Yeah.
Halloween.
Halloween. It's coming up, right? So it comes up once a year, and you have a particular strategy that you go through, or if you're taking your younger brothers or sisters or nephews or nieces, and you take them around at a particular day, night, time. You know what the, what's another name for Halloween?
Hallows-Eve.
Or Samhain. That's frightening. Okay, the origins of Halloween are kind of creepy, which they should be because it's Halloween. Kairos can also happen once in a lifetime. Job interview, right? That's it. If you blow it, that's it. It means the window of opportunity of time and place. Remember, there are two words for in Greek for time. One is chronos, measure of time. The other one is kairos, which means context of time and place. Does that one make sense? When you have a persuasive document, so give me a topic, persuasive topic or something of. Too early, huh?
Persuasive topic?
How about White House security?
There we go.
Anybody heard about that? Yeah. Oops. What's her name? Pearson was the head of the White House security staff, and she just resigned. You know why?
Too many people seem to that.
Yeah, once you have somebody actually get into the White House with a knife, and the president, before that, was riding in an elevator next to a guy who's a convicted felon with a gun, then you start to question the safeguards. There's a communication breakdown. So one persuasive thing could be, well, we need to tighten things up a bit. It's called an exigency. And when we look at the rhetorical situation, what are the exigencies? What do we need to take care of right away? What's important, right? So the claim could be, our security system seems somewhat lax. What's the support for that?
So random people getting into the White House.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty good support for the claim, which is a guy with a knife ran into the White House and was not stopped. Pretty much of a slam dunk on that one. And then some warrants or assumptions about that would be, we don't want men, anybody, women, running into the White House with knives, unchecked. That's a pretty good assumption. But each time you have a claim, you have support, which is the evidence that supports that claim, and then you have questions surrounding that. What is the value of this? Is that true? You know, and all of these. So we'll talk more about that. But that's the Toulmin model, which is very useful. Once you've parsed out that this is not informative, instructive, but it's persuasive, or it's a combination. And remember we talked about that they could be combinations. Aristotelian appeals. Another thing you want to look at a document is to say, are they using emotion, pathos, as an appeal? Are they using patriotism? Are they using sex appeal? Are they using guilt? Guilt is a good one, by the way, particularly with abused animals, and they say give money, and I just turn them off because I can't bear to watch that, so they don't get any money from me. They just get, I'm too guilty and depressed, so I'm not sure they're successful. There's anger. You know, when you have, you're trying to get people riled about something, right? We need to vote against this bill. right? Because you're really going to let people do that to you, and you're going to use that. Logos, logic, word choice. What A is bigger than B, B is bigger than C, therefore what? Yeah, A is bigger than C, right? That type of thing. It's a syllogism, right? So you say all humans are mortal, general premise. Then an example, Socrates was human, therefore what?
Socrates was mortal.
Yeah, and it works in that particular case. It doesn't always work, and sometimes syllogisms they're a deductive form of logic, so they're closed circuit, so they have a limited applicability. So all three parts have to be true: the general premise, the minor premise, and the conclusion. So all humans are mortal. Is that true?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Socrates was human. Is that true? Probably. Now we're getting into the iffies. Did he even exist? Was he Plato's dog? Yeah, I mean, you can get into all kinds of things. And then therefore, and then the conclusion. And that's a form of logic. That's a form of deductive logic. We're probably going to be dealing more and more with inductive logic, which is a little bit more useful. The gentleman who came up with the Toulmin model, British philosopher by the name of Stephen Toulmin, said, wow, we need, sometimes the syllogism is rather limited in its use, so let's talk about using something that's a little more broad. And you can see how these can be true or not true, but the onus is on the people arguing to prove whether or not they are true. And we're going to be talking about fallacies and how you can use those to say, well, I don't know if that's necessarily true. And you see the difference between an axiom and probability? Okay. Ethos. What's ethos? Very good. Give me an example of ethos.
The doctor in the lab coat.
Dr. Lab Coat, going to let him do all kinds of things to me because he's wearing a white lab coat.
Common PhD.
PhD. I have letters after my name, therefore I must know what I'm talking about. Yeah. No warrants there. I'm a doctor, trust me. I want to start wearing a white lab coat. I would start teaching in a white lab coat and a clipboard. No, it's like an outpatient. Don't carry me away. Good. Any questions on those? The Aristotelian appeals? Who was Aristotle?
Greek philosopher, tutor to Alexander the Great.
Wow, I love teaching in the Honors College. Who was his teacher?
Aristotle was taught by Plato, who was taught by Socrates.
Yeah.
If Socrates is dead.
Whom did Alexander the Great teach?
That I can't tell you.
Because he didn't, he died.
Yeah.
That was a trick question. He went from Alexander the Great to Alexander not so great. To Alexander the Dead. You never hear that one. Okay. Writing is hard. Sorry. I didn't want to go over that again, but it is. It's difficult, and I'm here to help you. So the three major assignments that you're going to have, and we're going to talk about the one what's going to be due for Tuesday, not Monday. This is the Tuesday, Thursday class, right? Okay. Rhetorical analysis. You're going to take some kind of document, and you're going to say, hey, this would be a really good one. It could be, and by the way, it doesn't have to be on paper. It could be a TED Talk. It can be anything you want. I'm going to let you choose what document you want to take apart. But I am going to ask you to tell me, what is the purpose of that document? Is it informative, persuasive, instructive? By the way, a lot of TED Talks tend to be informative with a component of persuasion, don't they? And we'll look at some examples of that. So you want to first key that out so you can decide which are the proper tools of analysis to use. So in case that the document is persuasive, I know I can use the Toulmin model. I know I can look at the Aristotelian appeals. Among all three, I can use Kairos because it becomes important, whether it's instructive, informative, or persuasive. Whom is this document designed for? Give me a demographic profile. The more you tell me about the audience, the primary audience, the more I'll be able to understand how effective the technique was in getting the purpose across to the target. Make sense? And again, this is a review, so we'll go more, obviously more into detail on that. You'll also be writing an argument paper. You'll be doing research on a topic, and you'll be looking at several sides of the topic, and then you will build a claim. And here's where you want to use the Toulmin model to build your own argument. In some cases, you can analyze an argument with it, but when it's the difference between what's called a rhetorical analysis and a rhetorical strategy. A rhetorical analysis is I'm picking this apart, analyzing it to see how it works. A strategy is I'm going to do some arguing. So I want to figure out, what is my claim? Because a lot of times you know how you feel about something, but how do you articulate it? One way to figure that out is to do some research on the topic. What do people have to say on both sides? You'll need evidence, and then you'll need to think about the assumptions. What is unstated about this? This is something in argumentation. Anybody ever do debate or forensics? Okay. There's something called prolepsis in debate, which means fast forward. It's when you say, I know what you're going to say, but I've already thought about that, and then you address it before. It means flash forward. So that can be a very effective rhetorical strategy when you're debating. Right? You've probably covered some of this stuff, actually, if you took debate, right?
A little bit.
A little bit, and it has a vague sense of familiarity about it. It's what school is. It's déjà vu. And once you graduate, about 4 or 5 years, after taking 4 years of Spanish, you'll remember how to conjugate verbs. That's about it. Rogerian argument. The last paper you'll be doing for me is to look at two sides of an issue and try to find some common ground. And again, it's named after Carl Rogers, the positive existentialist psychologist, who came up with the idea, well, what if we took two sides, and if you sort of picture the Venn diagram, what's the common ground these two sides have? How can we come to some kind of compromise? If we're going to pass a bill in Congress, remember when they did that? They used to do that? And they would have to come to some compromise, because if you have a two-party system particularly, and you have a bunch of Republicans and Democrats, we want to pass this bill. Well, okay, if it has these writers on it, okay, if it has so basically it means no one's going to be happy in the end, but at least you get the bill passed through. That's a very tragic model of a Rogerian argument. Any questions about those or anything? Still the first week, so we're still trying to find our way. Signal to noise ratio is looking at how is noise created from the author or the creator of the document to the person that's accessing the document, okay? Errors. Errors in communication. By the way, I was thinking of, we mentioned the White House security situation, and we talked about Banksy, breakdowns in communication. There's another one. The Ebola patient in Dallas told the nurse that he had come from Liberia and wasn't feeling well. And this got communicated, but then was, I guess, somewhere it got neglected. Someone neglected to mention it later on. So an error can be not giving communication. Noise can be created by failing to put in a detail. So, and sometimes that error can cause, oh no, I have a proofing error, I lost points on my essay, and sometimes it can mean an epidemic. So you want to figure out what that is. So a misplaced comma, it's the correct spelling but the wrong word. Okay? Was I telling you guys about the text I got from my wife? It said, will you be home by fish? On my text, and I didn't know what to say, so I wrote back, probably more like fish 30. I guess she meant 5, but autocorrect has a way of destroying I should put autocorrect up here, because wow, there's some strange things that come over that. So I'll be getting home long before fish tonight. Linguistic or semiotic ambiguity, and this is a case where you have a possible contronym. A contronym, you know what synonym is? Two words that mean the same thing? A contronym, and we're talking about this in the translations colloquium, is a word that means two opposite things, and they're in lots of different languages. In fact, we were talking about Plato and Socrates. Socrates, in the Platonic dialogue Phaedrus, uses the term pharmakon. Do you know about this?
Vaguely, I've heard this before.
Yeah. Pharmakon is where we get the word pharmacy, pharmaceutical. It can mean poison that kills you or cure that keeps you from dying. And so in a lot of different languages, you have contronyms. English is full of contronyms, and we don't think about it until we look at the context. Remember I talked about text and context? What's sanction mean?
To give the okay to do something.
Give the okay. I give you permission. Yeah. His hand went up again, yes.
To stop someone.
Yes. It means to withdraw permission. We're imposing sanctions. I sanction your project. One word means two completely opposite things. What's cleave mean?
Chop or remove.
Yeah, to separate. I'm going to, a cleaver, right? And a woman shall cleave unto her husband. Bring together. Cleavage. I'm not sure if that means separate or bring together, but you get the idea. Yeah. Wasn't a good example. Let me go to another word.
You're talking about rocks, right?
What's that? Yes. Yes, I am. The crevasse. Quickly think of another word. Sometimes you don't have, it's not necessarily a contronym, but it can be ambiguity in terms of what do you mean by what you're saying. So it could be something along the lines of, what's that? Do you know the word must? Okay. Noel, right? Yes. You must be Noel.
Yes, I am.
You must clean your room.
Why?
Just became your mother. That was really weird. The word must, it's called a verb modal, or it can be classified as what they call epistemic, which means probability. Oh, you must be Noel. I meet you at a UHC thing. Yeah, I've heard some really weird things about you, and you were described to me, so you must be Noel. The probability is that you're Noel. I'm not saying thou shalt be Noel, right? I'm not commanding you to be Noel.
You're saying with some degree of certainty, I may be Noel.
Yeah, whereas the deontic is the command, thou shalt. There's actually again, talking about this in my translations colloquium, but there's anybody ever read East of Eden? Mm-hmm. Wonderful book. Oh, love Steinbeck. At one point he's talking about the Chinese cook Lee, and he's saying, I used to listen to you read to the boys from the Bible, from the King James, and it talked about Cain and Abel. And at one point, you know, spoiler alert, Cain kills Abel. Actually, he was teaching a film class, and one student was talking about the Passion, and then she says, and then when they crucify him, and I yelled, spoiler alert, and she said, I'm sorry. Just kidding. The mark of Cain is placed on him, and so now he's killed his brother, and the word in Hebrew is timshel, and what it means is you will live the rest of your life unharmed, right? Or it means may. Or will, shalt. And then when it was translated into NIV, New International Version, it said, thou mayest. Again, deontic and epistemic. And in that one word, and by the way, the Hebrew word is a contronym in a way. And it's a contronym between, talk about a difference in interpretation and unpacking, free will and predestination. See what I mean? This is why biblical and scriptural interpretation and constitutional interpretation are insane. One word can make all the difference.
Right, completely changes the connotation of the story.
Well, yeah. Do we have free will or are we predestined? You will live the... Okay, good. God gave me a guarantee. You may, if you play your cards right. Totally different, yeah. So anyway, there's a case where language becomes very, very rich. What's that?
It changes the whole premise of the book.
Now you want to reread it, which, by the way... No. No. Too big. No time.
Even just Genesis.
Genesis is actually short but pretty dense. Yeah, try Numbers and Leviticus.
Yeah.
If you like reading really hard to pronounce names and dietary laws, go for it.
And if you want to have fun with logic, you go back to that same book and try
Yeah.
to figure it all out.
Yeah. I was told, someone said, I tried to read the Bible. I said, oh no, you should have come to talk to me first. Because there's some that you can kind of skip and go back to later.
Right.
It's kind of like reading a manual, you know, how to be a Jew. Leviticus. All right. Culture, and we talked a little bit about the noise can be created by misunderstanding somebody. It can be in translation. It can also be gestures. All cultures have different gestures. If you're ignorant of the culture or food, you bring the wrong food because you didn't know that they don't eat live cats in that particular culture. They dissect them and then they eat them. No, that's vivisecting. That's wrong. Gender, communication between genders can be problematic. And it changes over time. Remember we talked about kairos, context of time and place? Gender communication has changed radically because the culture has changed. Our culture, our zeitgeist, the spirit of the time. We talked about kairos. If you remove something from its context of place and time, you may create noise because you're not reading it in the same way, right? Again, to use an example, you mentioned Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. What does that mean? Let's do a rhetorical analysis. What purpose is that text?
Context for why everything is.
Okay, but always remember to use the rhetorical analysis in terms of purpose, audience, technique. So what's the purpose of the three that we've looked at? Yeah.
To describe Christian beliefs.
Okay, well, yeah, originally Jewish, but yeah. Christians got it much later. But what, I guess what my point is, let me be forthright then. Informative, instructive, persuasive.
Informative.
Well, it depends on when you're reading it and who's reading it. If you go back a few thousand years and you're a rabbi and you're reading it, you're saying, I did not know that. It's a history book. Right? I mean, without being snarky, it's a history book and it's telling us where we came from. Okay? If you're trying to argue that it's still a history book, then you get into a persuasive context.